Well, hello there. Hope everyone's doing okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I was recording or not. So this is a short video that's going to talk about the um, the Proclamation of 1763, some of the background, why the law was made, why it was passed, and if it did any good. So we're going to read. This is Chapter 5, Section 2. The colonists resist. Whoops. The colonists resist tighter control, and we're going to read about the conflict with Native Americans. Remember, what's the situation at this point? French and Indian War is over. The French have they ceded a bunch of territory. This is all British land now. So British have land from all the way from the coast of the Atlantic Ocean, which is here, all the way across to the Mississippi River, which is here. So all of this is, quote, British territory. Of course, we know that Native Americans live all throughout here, right? And that's going to be a problem because who wants to go to this area? The British colonists do. They want to settle all this land out in the frontier. But Native Americans already live there. That's a problem for both groups. So let's take a look here and see what happens. So conflict with Native Americans. By 1763, I'm reading right here from the text. By 1763, Britain controlled almost all of North America east of the Mississippi River. That's that big area that we just looked at on the map. This enormous territory promised endless room for settlement. However, Native Americans living west of the Appalachian Mountains were desperately trying to keep their lands. Fighting between Native Americans and white settlers began as soon as the French and Indian War ended. So, just because the French and Indian War ended did not end violence out on the frontier, right? Native Americans were still living out there, trying to protect their lands. Any settlers that were out on the frontier were taking a big risk, and let's see what happened with that. Pontiac's War. In the last days of the French and Indian War, the leader of the Ottawa Nation, Pontiac, formed an alliance of Western Native Americans. In May 1763, Pontiac and his allies attacked British forts and settlements throughout the area. Nearly half a dozen Western British forts were destroyed, and at least 2,000 backcountry settlers were killed. British settlers reacted with equal viciousness. They killed Native Americans who had not attacked them. The British finally defeated Pontiac's forces in early August after a battle near Fort Pitt. Pontiac continued to fight for another year, but by the fall of 1764, the war was over. So, lots of violence, a lot of death, because what are they still fighting about? The land. So you have 2,000 backcountry settlers that are killed. They backlash and kill a bunch of Native Americans, even some that had nothing to do with those attacks. So it's not a pretty situation. You got to think about, how does the king back home feel about all this? Well, if you really care about your citizens, care about these colonists, then what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to send soldiers to go out there, out into the frontier, onto this backcountry. Send soldiers out there, rebuild all the forts, and have soldiers out there to protect all these settlers. The problem is that the British were quite broke because of all the wars they had been fighting. They fought against the French in North America as well as in Europe, and the British were essentially they could not afford to. They just couldn't afford to send any soldiers to do what needed to be done in America. So the next best thing would be to say, all right, I know you guys want to move out into this wilderness, into the frontier, but it's not going to be a good idea because we can't protect you. We don't have the money to protect you if you want to move out into into the West, into this backcountry. It's not safe. The Native Americans don't want you there, and we can't protect you. We don't have the money to protect you. So what does the British government do? What does the king do? Let's read this. They issue the Proclamation of 1763. It says, the British wanted to avoid further wars with Native Americans on the frontier because they couldn't afford to go to war. Therefore, the British government issued the Proclamation of 1763. It banned. What does it mean to ban something? It means to not allow it. Okay. So what did they ban? The British government banned colonial settlement west of a line drawn along the Appalachian Mountains. Settlers were told they had to move to a location east of that line. So if you were a settler and you wanted to move out this area, sorry, not allowed to. The Proclamation line was right along here. And it said, if you are a colonist and you live here in the red, dark red, you are not allowed to cross this line. You got to stay out of this area here. And if you're a settler that's out here already, you got to move back to the colonies. Now, the colonists have been living in this region, in America, a lot of them their whole lives. And for the king to suddenly say, no, you're not allowed to go here, you're not allowed to go there, a lot of settlers were not cool with this. So you can imagine this is the first thing that the king is doing that's going to really upset the colonists. So let's keep reading here. The proclamation. So the king says you can't move into this region, you can't cross this line. This is the proclamation line. What was the effect? The Proclamation of 1763 angered many colonists who believed they had the right to reside wherever they wanted. So did they obey it? That's the question, right? The proclamation was widely ignored and proved impossible for the British to enforce. So the colonists were essentially out loud and proud, moving right out to where they weren't supposed to be going. They said, we don't have to obey this rule. We don't want to obey this rule. And they knew that the British would not be able to enforce the law anyways. So essentially, they ignored the new law. So hope that helps you understand the Proclamation of 1763. If you have any questions, of course, ask. But it always helps to kind of reread it out of the text and then ask questions if you have questions. So hope that helped, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for putting up with my mustache.